Okay, today's objective is 134E, and it is students will be able to solve system word problems. Okay, get that down. Okay, this objective is actually really exciting because we're going to be able to apply what we've learned about solving systems to help us solve real-life word problems. Okay, you're going to see that these examples that we're doing are going to be real-life types of problems that we can use systems to help us solve. Okay, so let's dig in. This is, as I said here, this is a tough lesson. But once you get the hang of it, and if you really use the steps, you're going to get it. Okay, and it's going to feel good to solve these types of tough word problems. Okay, so the steps that we're going to use, first of all, anytime we are solving word problems, you need to use this. Okay, all cups is a way to actively read in math so that we don't miss important things. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is determine if there are two variables and what they are. So as we're reading, we're going to be looking for, are there two things that we don't know, or two things that can change? Okay. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to see if we can write two equations with those variables. Okay. Once we have the two equations, we're going to ask ourselves, well, what is the best method for solving the system? And the three methods that we can use to solve systems, the first one that we learned about is graphing. Okay, the second one that we learned about is substitution. And the third one that we learned about was elimination. Okay. So we're going to choose a method that we think would work best and then solve it. And then we're going to, just like we do in cups, the sanity check, we're going to evaluate our answer to see if it makes sense. Okay, so let's get started with example number 1. Okay, go ahead and use cups and actively read number 1. Okay, so if I'm going to use cups to actively read it, here's what I would do, and I want you to check your cups with mine. Let's see, Alexander played some basketball over spring break. He told our advisory guys that in one of his basketball games he made a total of 12 two-point and three-point baskets. And he scored a total of 26 points. Okay, and the question is, how many two-point shots did he make? And there's actually another one. How many three-point shots did he make? Okay, so we have two questions. Okay. So again, we're going to use our steps. Whenever we're looking at word problems, we need to look, well, what's the question asking us? One question is, how many two-point shots did he make, right? So we need to assign a variable to two-point shots. I'm going to use the variable t for two-point shots. Now, and then second question is, how many three-point shots did he make? Well, we can't use the same variable because if we use t again, we mean t means two-point shots and three-point shots, and clearly we have to have different variables for different things. So I think I'm going to use e, because when I say the word 3, okay, those two e's at the end really stand out for me. So t stands for two-pointer, and the e stands for three-pointer. Okay? All right. Now, let's go back and look at what other information is important in this. Okay, and this is where it gets tricky. Okay, he made a total of 12 two-point and two-point and three-point baskets. Okay, here's a total. Let's triple underline the word total, because we know total tells us that it means equals. So it equals 12. Well, what equals 12? Well, what equals 12 is the number of shots that Alex made, or that he shot. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to say, oh, well, he shot 12 total. Well, what types of shots did he shoot? Well, he only shot two-pointers and three-pointers. Okay, So all this equation right here is saying is that the total number of 2-pointers that he shot and the total number of 3-pointers that he shot together, he shot 12 baskets. Okay. So let's go back here and fill in some of the things. So what are the two variables in this problem? The two variables are 2-pointers, and the other one is 3-pointers. And this is just baskets or shots that he took. Okay. All right. So let me scroll down a little bit more. So one equation that we just came up with was, again, and let's actually write this out in words. So I'm going to actually change that to baskets or shots. Okay, so his shots, he shot 2-pointers and he shot 3-pointers. And he shot a total of 12. Okay, so that's that piece of information right up here. Now, what other piece of information was given to us? He scored a total of 26 points. Okay, so the other thing that we're looking for, or that we know, is the points that he made. Okay, so if we think about, and the total was he made 26 points. Okay, so now that we're talking about points, we have to assign values with each one of these 2-pointers. So with a 2-pointer, how many points is a 2-pointer worth? Well, that's pretty clear. It's worth 2 points. Okay, so all this is saying right here is that for every 2-point basket he made, that earned him 2 points. Okay, and we're going to add up his points. He also shot 3-pointers. Well, how many points was each 3-pointer worth? Each 3-pointer is worth, clearly, 3 points. Okay, so here's the other equation. 2t plus 3e is equal to 26. Okay. Now, a common kind of misunderstanding on this, or what students often do, is they say, why don't we write right here like 2t? Why don't we put the 2 with the t right here? Okay, and the reason is because when we're just adding up the number of shots that he made, okay, if we're sitting there watching Alex shoot baskets, okay, when we're just trying to figure out how many total baskets he shot, we don't care how much each point, how many points he scored off of each one. All we care about is seeing, oh, he just shot a 2-pointer, that's 1. Oh, he just shot another 2-pointer, that's 2. Okay, so we're just adding up the shots. We don't care how many points they're worth. Okay? All right, now that we have our two equations, this should be easy for you to solve. Okay? Let me ask you, what method do you think would be the best method to solve this? Okay? I would either use elimination or possibly even substitution would work good. Because if you want to use substitution, and I'm going to do it over here, t plus e is equal to 12. You could very easily solve this for t. So you would have something like t is equal to 12 minus e. Okay, and then what you could do is you could take that and substitute it back in for t into this equation. Okay, so substitution would work. You could also use elimination, and you would have to multiply this top equation in order to get the variables to cancel. Okay, so either one. So you guys should have the background knowledge to solve that system now using either method, elimination or substitution. So before you come to class, make sure that you have solved that equation and you have both answers. How many 2-pointers he made, and how many 2-pointers he shot, and how many 3-pointers he shot. Okay? Okay, here's example number 2. The equations, 5x plus 2y is equal to 48, and 3x plus 2y represents the money collected from school, concert ticket sales during 2 class periods. If x represents the total cost for adult tickets, and y represents the total cost for student tickets, what is the cost for each adult ticket? Okay. I like to quickly, when I'm doing these things, just write out That way I don't have to go back and look at all the words. X is adult, right? And Y was student. I like to just, take 10 seconds, write that out. That way I know exactly what each variable stands for. Okay, and then I'm just going to write out. Okay, so my two equations again were 5x plus 2y is equal to 48. And then 3x plus 2y is equal to 32. Okay. Now this one is actually pretty easy for us to solve. We should know how to solve this right away. So I want to ask you guys, and I want you to kind of say it in your head, what method would work best to solve this system? Okay, hopefully you identified that elimination would work best. And the reason why is because you already have, okay, with your y's, these have the same coefficients. So they're easy to cancel. And then the next question is, well, what do you need to do? Add or subtract these in order to get them to cancel? Okay, and the answer, well, if you add them, 2 plus 2 is going to be 4, so that's not going to cancel. So instead you can subtract the two equations. So you would have 5x minus 3x would be 2x. 2y minus 2y cancels or gives me 0y. And then 48 minus 32 would give me 16. So then I can just rewrite this, because 0 times any number will give me 0. So I'm left with 2x is equal to 16. X divided by 2, x is equal to 8. Okay. Now, does that answer our question? The question was, what is the cost for each adult ticket? Okay. Well, the answer that we got for adult, which is X, okay, would be $8. So the answer to this one would be $8. Okay. And we can stop there because it's only asking for the adult ticket. It's not asking for the cost of the student ticket. If we want to know the cost of the student ticket, we could very easily plug this $8 in for either of these x's up here, and then solve for y and figure out how much each student ticket costs. Alright, so let's go on to the next example. Okay, a test has 20 questions worth 100 points. The test consists of true or false questions worth 3 points each, okay, and multiple choice questions worth 11 points each. Okay, how many multiple choice questions are there on the test? Okay, so what are the things that we are trying to find, or basically what two things don't we know? Well, we don't know how many true-false questions there are and how many multiple choice questions there are. So those are variables. Now let's think through what would be the best variable to use for true-false. I mean, it doesn't matter. You could use T or F. I think I'm going to use T just because it starts with true. So I think I'm going to use T for true or false. And what was it? Oh, multiple choice. I think I'll just use M because the multiple starts with M. So my two variables are T and M. Okay, so I look at this. A test has 20 questions. Okay, so 20 questions. So actually, let's change that to number of questions. Okay, we know that there are 20. Okay, now so then we ask ourselves, well, what types of questions were on this test? And in this case, there are only two types of questions on the test. We only had the true-false plus the multiple choice. Okay. Now, I want to ask you guys, should we put, okay, and don't write this right now, okay, I just want you watching. Should we put the number of points that each one's worth? So the true-false are worth 3 points. Again, you are not writing this. Should we put 3 here, and then the multiple choice were worth 11? Should we put those in and say, oh, now my 3t plus 11 is equal to 20 questions? Okay. Well, the 3 and the 11 have to deal with points, right? Does this equation right here deal at all with points? And the answer is no. This equation is only referencing the number of questions. So we don't care how much each question is worth for this equation. We only care how many there are. Okay, so that's why we don't have the coefficients yet of the 3 and 11, because all we care about is the number of questions, not how many points it's worth. Okay, but now our second equation does have to deal with points. Okay, well, how many total points were on this test? There were 100 points on the test. Now that we're dealing with points, we have to know, well, how many points was each true or false question worth? And the answer that we know, it says right here, each true or false was worth 3 points. Okay, so if you get 2 of them right, you had 2 times 3 would be 6 points. If you got 3 of them right, 3 times 3 would be 9 points. Okay, so we're obviously going to add the number of points that we get from true or false questions and multiple choice questions. Just like on our test, you add the number of points from your short answer with your points from the multiple choice. So we're obviously going to add our points up. And the other variable that we said was multiple choice. And how many points was each multiple choice question worth? And the answer is each multiple choice was worth 11 points. Okay. So now we have our two equations. The one equation just deals with the total number of questions. We just add up how many true false, how many multiple choice, and we know it told us that there's 20. The second equation deals with the number of points. We know that there were 100 points. Okay, so we had 3 points times each true or false question, and 11 points for every multiple choice. So those are the two equations. Now from this, you should easily be able to solve it. I want you to take a second, think about what method you think would be best to use for this problem. And make sure you're thinking about why it would be best. Okay. This is kind of like that first one, where we could actually use substitution or elimination pretty easily for this. If we used elimination, I would try to cancel my t's just because it's a smaller number. So this is a positive 3t. Okay, we should have remembered from elimination, I would want this other one to be this t up here. I would want that to be a negative 3. That way I could simply add them. So there's a 1 there right now. So what would I need to multiply this top equation by to get this t to be a negative 3? So I'm basically asking 1 times what number will give me a negative 3? And the answer is clearly a negative 3 on this one. Okay. So if I multiply this entire equation by negative 3, I could easily eliminate. Okay. Alright, so you guys need to solve this problem. Make sure you go back, reread the question. It's only asking the number of multiple choice questions on the test. Okay. So, again, make sure you solve that problem before you come to class. Okay, let's look at number 4. Margie is responsible for buying a week's supply of food and medication for the dogs and cats of the local shelter. The food and medication for each dog, so for each dog, costs twice as much as those supplies for the cat. Okay, she needs to feed 164 cats and 24 dogs. Okay, her budget is $4,240. How much can Margie spend on each dog? And I'm going to circle the dog because we're really focused on dogs, not cats, for food and medication. Okay. This problem gets kind of tricky because students really struggle with writing two equations. Okay. So if we look at it, okay, so some numbers that stick out to us right away are the 164 cats and 24 dogs, and her budget is, we know that is means equal, 4,240. Okay, so I'm going to write out this first one. So something is equal to 4,240. Okay, And what is that? Well, it is the cost of feeding the dogs and cats, right? So let's actually write the cost. This equation has to deal with the cost. I always think it's helpful to write out like in words what this equation is dealing with. Okay, so if we're feeding, obviously I think the best variables for this would be C for cats and D for dogs. Okay. If we're feeding, let's see, we're feeding 164 cats, right? So 164 C plus 24 dog, 24 D. Okay. Now, before going, I want to make sure that we really understand what these variables stand for. Okay. This C right here stands for, we know that we're feeding 164 cats, but what we don't know, okay, this equation has to deal with money, right? What we don't know is this C represents how much it costs to feed each cat. Okay. And what do you think this D stands for? Well, the D stands for how much it costs to feed each dog. Okay. It's really important that you understand these equations. All this is saying is that we have 164 cats, okay? And we have to multiply that 164 by how much it costs to feed each one. Okay, so I want you guys to have your calculators ready. Let's say it costs $2 to feed each cat. Let's say it costs $2 to feed each cat. Well, if you multiply the 164 times the 2, I think you would get, what would that be, 328? Okay, so if it costs $2 to feed each cat, you would say, oh, you had to spend $328 on each cat. Okay, so that's all this equation represents. All right, now if we look back up here, it's kind of tricky to see another equation in this because it's like, oh, well, I already dealt with all those numbers, right? Those are all done. But we did underline some key information up here. The food and medication for each dog, okay, cost twice as much as those supplies for cats. Okay, so what is more expensive to feed, dogs or cats? And I want you to write this above. Dogs cost more. Okay, dogs cost more. It's really important that we see that when we're thinking about these prices, we see that dogs cost more. Well, how much more? Twice as much as the supplies for cat. Okay, so another way that we can show that is, and let's start that other equation down here, we can show that twice as much for the cat. And what would that equal? Well, that equals what the dog's costs are. Okay, so now that we have this equation, let me kind of rephrase it, and let's read this equation. So D equals 2C. All we're saying is that the cost for the dog is twice as much as the cat. Okay, so let's say, again, the cat costs, and I'm just making up these numbers, let's say that the cat costs $5 for supplies. How much would it cost for the dog? Well, you would do 2 times the $5, and you would say the dog is 10. Okay, so the food and medication for the dog costs twice as much as those supplies for the cat. This equation right here models that. 2 times the C is equal to the cost of the dog. So there's our second equation. Okay, if you have a question about that, because that is kind of tricky, hit pause now and make sure you write down specifically. Okay, here's what I do. I do this, do a question mark in my notes, and write out in words exactly what my question is. That way when we get to class, you guys can ask your questions right away. Okay, now you have your 2 equations. Okay, you have this equation up here, and you also have this equation down here. Clearly, the best method to solve this system would be substitution. Okay, so if you use substitution, you know what D is, right? D is this, so you can plug that in for D. Okay, all right. You need to, for the homework for this, you need to finish this problem, and you also need to finish the rest of the problems in your notes packet for this objective. Okay, so before you get to class, it is homework to finish the rest of the problems in this notes packet for 134E. Okay, and make sure you're using a pencil, because if you make mistakes, okay, you need to be able to erase it in your notes packet and get the correct work down. A few things: make sure you use cups. Okay, make sure you are looking for the two variables, what two things can change. Finally, you got to focus on writing your equations. The toughest thing about this objective is figuring out what the equations are from the word problems. Okay? So again, make sure you have those done before you get to class.